Welcome back to the Fundraising Beyond Borders podcast. Today, I am really excited to announce Dan Drucker, founder and facilitator of Philanthropy Fuel. Dan, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Morgan. This is great. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give our audience a little bit of background. So Dan, after 30 plus years of a career in corporate B2B, mostly recently as a VP of sales and marketing for a global tech powerhouse, Dan has made a really big leap this January, stepping away from corporate life to follow his passion for purpose-driven work. And he has really recognized how his skills and relationship building could impact the nonprofit world. He then has now launched Philanthropy Fuel this past August. It now provides workshops and coaching to empower fundraisers and development pros with the strategies, inspiration, and actionable tips they need to forge real connection with donors. So, Dan, thank you again for being here. I would love for you just to share a little bit more of your background of what you did previously, and then also what made you want to kind of move into the nonprofit space.
Sure. You may be a little bit nervous with the intro about how big of a move it was in my life and how big of a change, remembering back to those feelings. But thanks, Morgan. I had spent, 30, 35 years in corporate B2B sales and marketing, starting out as a salesperson, working my way up to leadership. And at the end, the last 15 years or so, I was running a sales and marketing division nationally for a global tech company. And it was awesome. I loved it. But, at some point, I kind of came to the realization that I wanted to move to the next phase of my life and went through the whole transition and transitioned to my successor. And my last day at the company after 20-something years was January 12th of this year. And I knew I was retiring from corporate, but I wasn't retiring from working completely. There were some things personally I wanted to do, spend more time with family, spend more time outside, photography, things like that, volunteering. But I wanted to start some sort of business. And I actually always thought it would be in sales coaching or sales leadership coaching because that was my background. And then I was kind of I've been doing that my whole career. And I started thinking about what I really want to do and give back and how I could have some purpose. And my sister, who's been in nonprofit for most of her career, kept dropping little hints to me about how, this stuff, the content that I put out there on sales and marketing and building relationships and taking a long-term view would really resonate well in the fundraising and development world. So I started kind of poking around, following some people that were big in that sector, asking questions, listening to podcasts, reading. And I really did notice that both the challenges and the skill sets and the capabilities and the mindset needed, there were a lot of parallels. And I started getting excited about it, started putting out content, was getting good, interactions and everything, and started networking. So, I decided to go for it and launched Philanthropy Fuel back in August, and with the main offering being a workshop for fundraising and development teams to work on their prospect development and donor relationship skills, along with sprinkling in a whole bunch of motivation, because I've definitely read that sector is under a lot of stress and burnout type of, environment.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's so crucial. But I know nonprofits have so much to learn from the for-profit space, and that's why I really wanted to have you on today, is just to kind of learn some of these key findings that you have implemented over the years in the for-profit space. So when we kind of think about international nonprofits specifically, and also just nonprofits, how can they start to leverage principles from corporate sales and corporate marketing to start to build trust and connect with donors who may be oceans away? Because the biggest thing we talk about here on this platform is, the key to international fundraising is building that donor trust, building that transparency with donors. So what can we do as international nonprofits, and what can we take from the for-profit sector and then now into the nonprofit sector?
Right. So that's a great question. And I think, it all comes down to relationship building. So a lot of the key factors are universal, whether we're talking about nonprofit, for-profit, personal connections. And the backbone really of building great relationships, right? It's trust plus comfort. And back when I was running sales and marketing organization in B2B, our major successes, if I think about it, really came when we were given an opportunity to ask deep questions and gain insight that maybe our competitors didn't have. And that's where the trust and comfort comes in. So if you think about the donors and the prospects that nonprofits deal with, they have to want to share information about their motivation and purpose. And they won't do that in a scenario where they're being badgered for donations or short-term fixes. So if you look at the nonprofit sector as a whole, I think what's really needed is kind of a mindset shift away from the short-term and transactional and towards long-term trust and relationship building. And that's even more important for international nonprofits that aren't as known, they aren't as trusted, and they may not have a ton of connections, when reaching out to potential supporters, like you said, that are oceans away. I mean, we've seen it a lot, but people, they have kind of an inborn sense of distrust these days, and that just gets exponentially larger when dealing with an entity that they just don't know much about, or they're just not comfortable with, or they just don't understand. So in my mind, everything an international nonprofit does has to be around building trust, understanding, and comfort. And as you know, the way to do that is through transparency, accountability, customized messaging that resonates with each individual, and just finding a way to immerse those donors and prospects, no matter where they're located, in the outcomes that they'd be supporting.
I really like that word, Dan, comfort. I haven't really used that in my with my audience yet, is comfort. So tell me a little bit more about that. What does that mean what does comfort mean?
Yeah, it's it's something I stumbled upon. I don't even think I made up that whole thing about trust has to have comfort. I believe I read it somewhere, and I wish I could give the author credit, but I don't remember. But
Yeah.
it's really true. You think about it, okay, someone trusts you, and that's great. So they've accepted your nonprofit as being legitimate and worthy of their support potentially. But it's that comfort that gets them to share. And that comfort really comes with the individual, not necessarily with the organization. It comes with the fundraising and development person or whoever's reaching out to them, the major gifts officer, whatever. They have to feel that they have a relationship with that person, that they're going to share stuff that's really deep down. Because if you think about, why do people give? They give because there's an emotional connection, whether it's they're impacted by the actual cause, someone in their family is, they just feel passionate about something, whether it's, the environment, taking care of kids, taking care of animals. They have to feel deep down that there's something there, and that's what that causes action. And they're not going to open up. People don't open up to strangers unless they have some degree of comfort. That's why I think trust alone, we talk about a lot, but it's not enough. I think you have to add that comfort factor. That gets people to open up. And once they open up, you start getting insights into their motivation. And now you can start leading them kind of on that journey to become a partner in your cause.
I really like that. And when you say, you need to get them to start opening up, a couple of things come to my mind of the how. So how can we actually get individuals to open up? And, there's some little things like surveys that you could do, or pick up the phone and have one-on-one conversations. But are there any ways that stand out to you when it talks about allowing individuals to be really comfortable and getting to know your organization and getting to understand the why and their motivation to giving?
Yeah, listen, I think I talk a lot about asking questions. I think that's critical. I think you need to, notes are fine, emails are fine, all that stuff is great. But I think to get someone to open up, you've got to first have a real big thirst for learning. And you have to understand exactly what it is that motivates them and how that matches with your cause. I mean, I've talked about getting to the core of a donor's why a lot. It's critical, especially when you talk about international and you're crossing geographical and cultural lines. At the end of the day, people are people, and there's some universal motivations we all share. People want to feel like their contribution is meaningful. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger. Another universal principle is empathy, showing that you truly understand the problem you're working to solve and why it matters to you is very powerful to the person on the other end. One more caution, I think, on empathy, I know I'm going a little bit off track here, is if it's not combined with time and attention, it comes across as superficial or just words. And again, that's not going to get somebody to open up. You've got to really be willing to spend the time to get to know them and to learn about what's important to them. I mean, in the end, you need to know their why, because it's, getting back to what I said before, it's that why that drives that emotion. And I'm a firm believer emotion is what drives action. And the job of anyone interacting with a donor or a prospect is to help them visualize a positive outcome, right? And if you haven't dove deep enough into what motivates them, how can you possibly help them visualize a positive outcome or lead them, down the path to changing the world the way they want to see it? So I think it's really about those individual connections, those individual interactions, having done your homework and asking a lot of questions just to bring out how you can match your mission's values with the values of the potential donor.
I love that, Dan. Thank you. And oftentimes I kind of hear international nonprofits use the excuse of, oh, my donors are abroad, or I can't connect with them. They're in a different state or a different city, so I can't go have a coffee with them. WhatsApp is such a great tool and such an easy tool these days to call and video call individuals. So if you are an international nonprofit and you have international donors, download WhatsApp right now, pick up the phone and have a conversation with them. We have to be creative in how we're establishing these relationships. Yes, we are overseas, but the fact too, right now, Dan, where are you based right now again? Are you in New York?
I'm in New York. And you're sitting there in
Zambia. Yep, exactly. So the fact that we are quite literally, like we keep on saying, oceans apart, but still able to do this, it's the being virtual these days is so easy. So just being a little creative in how we can still have those one-to-one meaningful relationships with donors is really important. But Dan, you also said at the very beginning as well, that, nonprofits, and most of our listeners are small to medium-sized nonprofits, but because we're international, we have to work even harder. But then also there's a lot of, larger nonprofits out there that have large brands and big brands. So what are some actionable steps that smaller nonprofits can take to stand out in a crowded field, especially when they don't have the brand recognition like larger organizations do?
Right. And I'm actually hearing about this a lot. Most of the people I'm talking to these days are from the smaller nonprofits, whether it's, in the US or abroad. But I'm going to kind of flip it a little bit, because I think, Morgan, that smaller nonprofits actually may have a little bit of an advantage here, because they can create that, close-knit personal experience for donors, which is something that some of the large organizations a lot of times struggle to deliver. So for the smaller nonprofits, I would say be unapologetically specific about your mission, about your impact. Let your organization's unique story shine through, and lean into the personal stories of the people or communities that your work is impacting. I think back, when I was in marketing, I was on a podcast similar to this, and I spoke about what I call super specificity. And in the corporate world, that means knowing each different customer persona that's a candidate for each of your services, and match them up with really concise messaging that strikes a chord with them. So the same holds true for nonprofits, and especially the smaller ones. They have to understand not just a generic high-level donor profile. They have to do the work to define several different donor personas that would support the various initiatives they're going to be undertaking. And then, it's a little bit of a game. Experiment with different ways to reach out to them with stories and messaging that match their motivations. Remember that donors like to have a direct line to the work they're supporting. So again, I think smaller nonprofits are a little bit more agile, so they can handle the regular personal updates. They can use social media to show kind of raw behind the scenes, authentic moments. I think another thing that works for smaller nonprofits is creating a sense of exclusivity. Make donors feel like they're part of a small, exclusive, special community, which they are. Invite them to virtual events, behind the scenes videos, things that kind of give them a glimpse of the work that they're helping with. I think if you really think about it, people today are searching to fulfill some sort of kind of like a sense of belonging. And I think the smaller nonprofits have an opportunity to ignite a movement by building a community of supporters that share similar goals and dreams. So I do think, while it is difficult because of the resource issue that, the larger nonprofits have and the name recognition, I do think smaller nonprofits have that kind of agility and the ability to create those personal moments that some of the larger organizations may struggle with.
Hey, international fundraiser. I know that online fundraising can feel overwhelming. You want to find new international donors, but you have no idea where to start. Trust me, I've been there before. And that's exactly why I started the International Fundraising Academy, to give you the tools, strategies, and support to grow your donor base without the guesswork. We do a deep dive in how to find and retain international donors through online individual giving. Inside the Academy, you'll get access to our Foundations course, monthly video trainings, tools and templates, monthly Q&A calls, and more. We have a special offer for our founding members too. The first 40 nonprofits or fundraisers to join lock in a special lifetime rate of $39 a month. These spots will go fast, so click the link in the show notes to join. See you there.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And I think back to a conversation I actually just had on Wednesday. I was working with an executive director in their program team, and I was hearing them talking about their programs, and they're actually going through somewhat of a rebrand with their mission and vision right now. So they're trying to figure it out. And, so what that comes down to is they say they provide education in Zambia. But what does that mean? There's so many organizations that provide education in Zambia. So it's almost like, what are their unique selling points? Like, how can we really dive into what makes them stand out? And those little things is what's going to connect a donor. So they provide a holistic education when they not only just provide an education, but they provide gender equality workshops. And then, even past that, not only gender equality, but how can you even dive down even deeper into what they provide within those gender equality workshops and within education? So it's kind of like breaking that down. And like you're saying, Dan, finding those personas and then going out and using that in your marketing and when you're communicating to your donors via campaigns and on your website and on your social media. So I think that's a really great place to start.
Embrace what makes you unique. I mean, I would say that for nonprofits. I'd say that for individuals as well. I mean, I've been blown away by the sector and how many different ways people have found to try to fix a certain problem or fix a certain cause. Like I've talked to people, that are supporting veterans here in the U.S. And you think, again, don't just say I support veterans. A lot of people do. What is the very specific thing? I met up with someone a few months ago, and the organization is called Guitars for Vets, and they give a series of 10 free guitar lessons to vets suffering with PTSD because it's been shown to be very therapeutic and help them get through that. And like, who would have thought of that, right? Who would have thought of an approach like that? And they've really embraced that uniqueness. So tackling a big problem, but doing it in a very specific way. And I think that's what smaller nonprofits have to embrace, is that uniqueness that sets them apart from everything else.
I agree. So we kind of talked about the uniqueness and we've talked about the why. So you talking about, understanding the donors' why. Is there any other ways? How can nonprofits in countries tap into the motivation of donors abroad? So are there any additional universal principles that apply?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about donors that are abroad, I don't think it differs all that much. Like I said, there's no more excuse in terms of technology. I do think you have to embrace digital because you're not going to call someone up and say, hey, can we meet for a cup of coffee? I'll be there in 14 hours or something like that. I think, you gotta use what you have. And I think the technology is important. So I do believe that a lot of digital channels work well for international nonprofits. I mean, everybody's got access to social media, but I think there's a balance there. You can't try to be all things to all people, but at the same time, you don't want to assume all of your donors and prospects hang out in the same place. So you've got to do your research. You don't want to overuse just one tool or one channel. You don't want to just use video, but you also don't want to dilute your messaging by spreading across too many channels. So to me, it screams out that nonprofits, especially international ones, and especially the smaller ones, need to have a messaging strategy. And they really need to have a digital messaging strategy.
Yes.
And like everything else, it starts with knowing as much about your donor and prospect personas as possible. I mean, there's no absolutes, but there is a lot of data about where people with certain characteristics, certain motivations, certain demographics consume their content, and you have to match the strategy with that knowledge. And I'd say... No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I completely agree. We offer a fractional fundraising client right now, and we thought we were going to get a lot further right when we started with them with their fundraising, but we had actually backtrack a lot and go through and rebrand and do a whole messaging guide because in order for us to clearly communicate to our donors, we had to get really clear on our messaging. So sometimes if you are struggling, if you're listening right now, to effectively get to your donors and figure out who they are and have concise campaigns, maybe it's looking into your messaging and developing a messaging plan, like you're saying, Dan.
That is great advice, Morgan. Really great advice. Because I say, I was going to bring up before, the key is to not look to inundate them with quantity. It's not about more. Each update, each message should really feel to the recipient like it's worth their time, like it's brand new, whether that's sharing a new insight, a quick impact story, or just a motivational message. And, I talked about multimedia, lean into it, but I'll come back to this. I used to talk about this with my marketing department as well when I was in corporate. Have fun with it, right? You can, if you're using video, mix it up. There's storytelling videos, there's explainer videos about how things work, there's animated shorts, there's what I would call talking head videos with your executives. The key is try things, experiment, ask for feedback. That's a big piece that a lot of organizations mix. They put a messaging strategy out there, and then they don't really follow up to ask people if it's resonating with them and working for them. And then, you iterate based on the feedback and what you're seeing and hearing, and eventually you get to what works. But they have to remember, so also, you're not doing it for the sake of putting this content out there. The ultimate goal, I would think, of any messaging strategy is to drive eventually a live conversation that starts the relationship building process.
Yep. I want everybody to hear that about the quality. I think it's important because, when a work nonprofit plan, vacation plan in place, they often have this huge plan and it doesn't get done, or something, they are overwhelmed by it, or they are just getting out newsletters every week because they were told they have to get out a newsletter. Let's think back. Yes. Yes. And so let's think back about what that messaging looks like. And it's not necessarily quantity, it's the quality and making sure that it's connecting with donors. And I like to think of it through, when I have donor engagement, I do think about communication, but also how are you inviting them into your community? So are there opportunities to invite them to be a volunteer or, join you virtually? But then also, how are you educating your donors? So making sure that you are educating donors about this topic that you're making an impact on, because they want about that side of your impact. And then I just wanted to ask too, what are some key elements when it comes to storytelling that international nonprofits can use to build that emotional connection with donors from different cultural backgrounds? So storytelling is key in international fundraising, because we, again, have to work a little bit harder because so many of our donors haven't necessarily been through the beneficiaries, gone through what beneficiaries are going through, or haven't been to that country or continent, don't understand the surroundings. There's so many different things that, a donor might not even fully understand. So what are some of those key elements of storytelling that people should implement when building an emotional connection?
Yeah, you made some great points. I mean, if you think about it, you're right. The international nonprofit, sharing stories is so important because people, they just don't know. And they're going to react with kind of not distrust, but just a lot of questions, right? So storytelling is a super powerful tool. And we all know that, especially in the nonprofit world. And it goes beyond words and it crosses boundaries. But there's two things I often talk about that I think we need to touch on. The first is, to me, the best way to present data is wrapped in a good story, right? So data alone doesn't generate emotion or action, but you do need impact data to secure trust. So work it into your stories. The second is a concept that I've called kind of like double impact. And what that means is, especially international nonprofits, you need to talk not only about the impact they've had on the communities they serve, which a lot of them are good at, they also need to share stories about the impact that's been felt by their donors. Because I think in some ways, those stories may resonate even greater with other potential donors, who will then be able to kind of see how someone similar to them was able to make a huge difference through your organization. And that's really strong stuff. The other thing is, all organizations struggle with this, nonprofits really do, is you've got to shine the light again, whether it's on your benefactors or beneficiaries. They're the heroes of the story. Nonprofit, the organization, despite all the great work they do, they're not the star of the story. They're not the star of the script, and they've got to realize that when they're telling their stories. The other thing I'll say, and again, going back to my marketing days, not every piece has to be a perfectly polished, wonderful, shiny, marketing piece. Sometimes a raw photo, a behind the scenes video, unedited, is better than a slick marketing place. And the last thing I'll say on this is you need the balance. You have to show both the struggles and the successes. People are more likely to identify with the challenges, and then they feel a strong sense of satisfaction when they see progress. That keeps them engaged, that keeps them excited, that gives them an emotional connection. I talked recently about this exact point, that you will be way more believable as a nonprofit and gain trust quicker if you avoid sugarcoating everything and share the potential roadblocks and even the reasons the mission could fail, along, of course, with your contingency plans, to minimize the chance that this happens. That really resonates with people, I think, more than just, hey, everything's going to be great and we're going to solve world hunger, in 2 years.
I was just on a podcast and basically saying the same exact thing. It's like we're on the podcast together because I completely agree. We have to have that element of showing people that like we're human at the end of the day, right? And we're going to make mistakes and share those mistakes, but also share like how and maybe it's not even a mistake, but maybe it's, you thought the programming was going to go this way, but because it's community driven and, the community, we have found X is a better alternative. We're going this direction now because of XYZ. So making sure you share, the why behind it too. But I think it's so important to show, the raw of who we are, any mistakes that we're making, also the fun side of things as well, that there's celebrations. It's not so serious. I often tell people just go live on Facebook, and have fun with it. Or send somebody a DM on a voice note, like a proper polished system that we kind of are taught in school with when it comes to fundraising. So I completely agree, Dan. Those are all really great.
No, I think it's great. I send some voice notes. I send a lot of voice notes on LinkedIn, and I get such a great reaction. People are like, I didn't even know that was a function that you could do. And I don't script them. I just pick up my phone, hit record, leave a 30-second message, and that's it. And, there was some on these collaborative articles, and so, how can you convince the rest of the organization that, if there's a dispute between, how do you gain consensus if there's a dispute about what type of messaging we should use? And my answer was, why do you need a consensus? Try both. Like, have fun with it. Make it a competition. See which one resonates better. See which one drives action, and then adjust accordingly. Don't take everything so seriously because that energy. I don't want to get all zen on us this morning, but that energy that you give out really gets read by the person on the other side, whether it's a donor, prospect, the communities you're serving. So if you're all stressed out and serious, well, they're going to be stressed out and serious. But if you're kind of relaxed and having fun and realize that, yes, the cause is serious, but not everything you do has to be this monumental task, I think you just get a lot more relationship building and connecting with people.
I completely agree. I remember that's how we got connected, your voice note. And I so appreciated that. And it's been one of my favorite things too, is just a simple voice note. It takes, like you said, 30 seconds and you can really start to build a meaningful relationship that way. These are all really, really great ideas, Dan. Thank you so much. One last thing. I know you talk a little bit about you like to provide resources, for burnout and motivation. Is there anything as an international nonprofit? We are coming towards year end and then heading into the new year. So just kind of with a new start of 2025, any last parting thoughts or motivational advice that you would give to international nonprofits?
Yeah, I think, listen, we all know, first of all, we're halfway through November. All right, I don't want to rush it yet. I was going to say we're almost in December, but I don't want to rush it too much. We haven't had Thanksgiving here yet. I know everybody's under stress because they're trying to finish the year strong, but the truth is, you've already done all the heavy lifting. It's not like you're going to launch new initiatives now. So I'd say now is actually a time to dial it back, which doesn't mean stop trying to meet your end goals, but I think it's just relaxed conversations. It's reach out to donors, prospects, just thank them for the impact they've had. don't even make an ask. They know you want money, right? They know nonprofits need money, right? Send a note that says, I'm not asking for anything now, but would love to get something on your calendar for January so we can talk about your goals for the new year. Do some fun stuff, whether it's video, whether it's just, little community stuff. I think try to keep it so, because people in general are stressed, not just because of year end, everything going on in the world. So I think the more you reach out just to thank them, just to share some things, just to maybe schedule some time in the new year, I think that resonates, but in terms of, your staff, especially fundraising development, you have to recognize that burnout is on the rise across the whole sector. So I think it's supporting them, asking them what they need, make sure they're given time to unplug, give them time off for the holidays. Nothing changes on January 1st other than it was an arbitrary line drawn on a calendar that says, this is year end, this is your beginning. But as far as your efforts to build relationships, that's on a continuum, right? That nothing, I used to go through it in sales. You trended towards your budget, and the clock would strike midnight on New Year's Eve. Everybody would be raising glasses, and I'd be like, oh my God, we're back to zero. Just like that, right? And the same thing I think is in the fundraising world. But you can't think of it like that. All your efforts, they're just continuous. I mean, the big thing you want to do now is just keep the momentum going so it flows through into the new year. It's an arbitrary measurement. I wouldn't get so caught up with it. Just keep doing the things that build relationship and make connections with potential donors and recurring donors.
Well said, Dan. And talking about being unplugged, I know that you also love being outdoors like me and love to travel. Is there anywhere, just a fun last question, is there anywhere that you would love to travel internationally anytime soon?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I think I told you originally someday, not quite there yet, when I get my photography game to where it is, I will be coming over to Africa. I will be going to the Serengeti during the Great Migration and with some tour and taking just amazing pictures because that's just, I've watched documentaries on it. I mean, that just blows my mind when you talk about nature like that in its most raw format. More immediately, we are starting to plan a trip to Iceland because I must see the Northern Lights and the geysers and all that great stuff. I just love that kind of Mother Nature type of stuff that's a little bit out of the ordinary. So my wife and I probably next October are going to head to Iceland.
You'll have to let us know how it goes. And any listeners, if you're in those parts of the world, you'll have to connect with Dan and give him some tips. But yeah, for sure. Dan, thank you so much for being here. Where can our listeners find you? Where can they connect with you?
I mean, the best place is LinkedIn. I publish content probably about 6 days a week. I'm always there, especially in the mornings. I usually publish around 8 a.m. on weekdays. And then I'm, commenting on my big thing on LinkedIn is getting in conversations. It's not about what you put out there. It's about, how you engage with people. So I'm all over LinkedIn. You can connect with me. You can follow me. You can send me a DM. You can visit my website at Philanthropy Fuel and send me a message. But I'm always up for conversations. It doesn't have to be about anything particular. I like to talk to people, especially in this sector, because I just find it really interesting, both from the consultant side as well as obviously the people working for the nonprofits, how many different things they're doing to push forward social good. It's really encouraging.